Have you ever gone through your local fast food joint, like a McDonald's or Flurger Fling, ordered your favorite thing on the menu, gotten your paper bag, gone home, and realized that you were given something completely wrong in the first place? I think that management needs some new employees. Luckily for them, I have these 75 candidates from Valheim who may or may not be ready to take on the everyday needs of hungry customers who want what they order. Now, the criteria for determining these potential drive-thru workers shall be this: customer service, communications, attention to detail, efficiency, adaptability, and the learning ability. Now, let's go ahead and hop right in and see who is fast food fabulous and who is a drive-thru disaster. Opening up, we find our character being carried by a Valkyrie, a bird-like female warrior who is tasked with gathering the deceased warriors and transporting them, aka us, to Valheim, wherein they must prove their worth to enter Valhalla. Now, the Valkyrie is a fantastic start to this list. They choose and select their own warriors, they are efficient in choosing who is worthy and who is not, and they definitely know how to communicate. So, they would know how to work the cash register. They would communicate with the customer and ask if they would like to supersize their meal with a voice of an angel, and they would promptly deliver the food on time with 100% accuracy. They would be fantastic and would be workers like no other. So I think that the Valkyrie is going to be a perfect start to this tier list, in which I want to go ahead and place her all the way into the S tier. So now we move to the Meadows with the small stalkers who bother everyone, the Greylings. Now, we are unsure about the exact lore of the Greylings compared to their tougher Grey Dwarf counterparts. They're just aggressive tree folk who run up and give you a good slash in the back while you're chopping down trees. I find the Greylings to be quite low on the IQ list, as all it knows is one basic attack. It has no communicational abilities, no real learning ability, and wouldn't pay a single bit of attention to my order and would just slam the headset and cast register to little itty-bitty bits. Overall, the Greylings are creatures who offer no substance to work in my local fast food joint, so this tier list will find that the Greylings are going to go all the way into the bottom, into the F tier. So next up, we find another annoying creature that seems to run up and hit you or decide to beat up your boat when you aren't looking, the boar. A simple boar has no real qualities of working a drive-thru, except as for the legendary new menu item known as the Pork Burger Supreme. Given their tasty qualities, I know I'm going to keep the boar out of the F tier, as at least hiring a boar and using it for food has some sort of redeeming quality, so give the boar the E tier. From the aggressive boar, we move on to the skittish deer, who I have to give some points to for at least having some adaptability and being able to run away from us when we close in on it. Now, of course, the negative side is that the communication through the headset would be terrible, and they would be too quiet to hear when ordering due to their temperament. I think the Valheim deer would still at least attempt to learn how to be good at the drive-thru, but would still fall pretty short. So I'm going to give the deer a tier above the boar and place it into the D tier. So now we have the first bird on this list, the gull. I mean, is there anything more annoying than hearing a seagull in real life cackling as you enjoy your french fries on the beach? I think not. A gull would just eat all the food the cooks set out to be given to the customers. They are intelligent to some extent, but given that they will just literally consume the food, I'm going to put them in the bottom, in the F tier. Moving on, we have the neck, a creature mixed with a lizard and frog who loves the water as much as I love a breakfast hash brown. Now, the necks have a pretty angry boy attitude that I think would seep into their work when they decide to yell at the customer when they have to repeat themselves more than once. I can see the neck at least having some capability to work, but more as one of those workers who you obviously know doesn't want to be there in any sort of capacity and is one bad day away from throwing ice cubes into the deep fryer. So we're going to place the neck in the E tier. Now we have the first boss of the game, Eikthyr. This big electric deer is one who cares only for the woods and wilderness of Valheim and simply wants to be at one with nature. Now, would Eikthyr have any sort of mentality to give me some extra ketchup when I ask for it? No, not at all. Eikthyr is going to reprimand anyone who orders literally anything made of any plants or animals of the forest, which is basically everything on the menu that is processed like no other. Overall though, Eikthyr is definitely one of the Valheim Valheim creatures I see being unable to work in any sort of capacity, and of course that means I will place him all the way at the bottom in the F tier. We move on to the Black Forest, where we meet these sinners and such who have rotted underneath the ground until their soul has gathered and twisted roots and moss to become the very creature we engage in battle, the Grey Dwarf. Now, they are a bit more intelligent and stronger than their Greyling counterparts, since they can at least run away and do ranged attacks with a rock. They seem to coordinate well enough with other Black Forest creatures as well, as they seem to always attack at the most inconvenient times. Their attitude does lower them a little bit, as they do have the dead eyes and no care for detail, but overall I have to give the Grey Dwarfs the B tier. They would be alright, but by no means good at serving up my food. We upgrade the height and strength of the Grey Dwarf to get the Grey Dwarf Brute, who I think meets the stereotypical big dumb fellow characteristics. You'll definitely get some sort of fast food, but with an 85% chance of it being wrong and a 100% chance that you will not say anything after the Brute glares at you until you leave. I think that encompasses the Brute. It is still somewhat intelligent, but to a much lesser extent than the normal Grey Dwarf, so I'm gonna knock it down a few tiers and place it into the D tier. Lastly, of the Grey Dwarfs, we have the Grey Dwarf Shaman, who I find to be the smartest of the bunch, but also has the greatest risk, given its poison spewing attacks and all. But it is definitely the highest in terms of intelligence, and I think it would be able to learn as well as be efficient and communicate well. The Grey Dwarf Shaman would probably be an excellent drive-thru worker, but would have a small chance that you will have unbelievable horrors in the bathroom because of the food poisoning caused by it. Maybe you can just ask said shaman to heal you instead of taking some Pepto-Bismol, but overall, I think that's a risk I am willing to take, and so I will give the shaman not the highest tier, but I will give it the A tier. We move on to the classic RPG enemy found in every game ever, the skeleton. Now, the first positive thing I immediately think of is that a skeleton is unable to digest the food, so we know it won't go around and sneak an onion ring from you when you aren't looking. But otherwise, they seem to be highly intelligent in that they can use a bow or sword and buckler. I think they are attentive and would be protective of their home, aka the drive-thru, as they protect the burial chambers with their lives, but without a tongue or any real ability to communicate, they will drop down out of the S tier, but at least make it into the A tier. So now we have the stinky skeleton variant, the rancid remains. I can think of a million liabilities from a creature who literally has rancid in the name and would have extreme concerns if it was working at my establishment. So this one's going to be an automatic one and go into the F tier. The last creature of the burial chambers is the ghost, who immediately I know is incapable of handing out food to the customers due to their corporeal form. But at least it can't stink up the joint and whatnot like the previous entrant. Maybe it could just be the one taking the orders, but it will obviously be slow at doing so, as it has to speak with long vowels and go, "What can I get you?" So I will place the ghost in a pretty low tier, but not all the way at the bottom, so I'm going to give it the E tier. Now we have the black bird that spawns primarily in the Black Forest, the crow. Crows are extremely intelligent, and so voice mimicry and adaptability allows for some pretty decent communications and such. I think that the crow could simply just fly around with a bag or drink holder and hand off foods at a great pace that would reduce that 20-car pileup to nothing in 15 minutes flat. The crow seems like a dark horse contender to me, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and place it into the highest tier and throw it into the S tier. So now we find one of the funniest creatures in the game, the troll. I mean, imagine having one giant drive-thru worker handing out your meal with only 2 fingers. Are you telling me no one would come and see that spectacle and sales would go through the roof? But for the criteria set out in the beginning of the video, I find that the troll would be one of those whose vocabulary extends to 2 words, such as "order a burger," and anything beyond that would lead to disaster. So we know that the troll would be not as good in learning ability, adaptability, or attention to detail. Pretty much in all regards, the troll would fail miserably. But I think the troll would deal with customer service accordingly due to their big size and of their even bigger heart. But seriously, overall, I do not see the troll having pretty much anything going for it, so I'm going to follow it up and place it into the E tier. Brenna's the first mini-boss of this ranking, where she comes with a Ghost Rider skull and a cool fiery sword. Of note, I did just rate the normal skeleton in the A tier, but now we have a bit more fire and a bit of a bulkier enemy. Now, is this a pro or con in comparison to the normal skeletal being? I think it's more of a con, as it is just a fire hazard that would either require more logistics to contain or simply be a greater risk at the register. Brenna also seems to be a more aggressive variant, so that means when a customer doesn't pull out their method of payment in 4.3 seconds or less, she gets a little angry. So with that, I am going to drop her down a tier, but I will throw her into the B tier. So next is the Black Forest boss, the Elder. Now, it is noted that a long time ago, the Elder and Man were once companions until Man discovered the axe and Odin banished him to Valheim due to his pride. I find the Elder to be a simple creature who wouldn't mind working the drive-thru as long as no lumberjacks were to show off the invention of the chainsaw to it. Maybe the Elder could even use their roots to help distribute the food a little faster. I think that the Elder is intelligent enough to adapt and learn quickly and could possibly fall back on its roots and become fond of Man once again, while it gives Man his much needed Diet Coke. Overall, the Elder seems pretty great, but once again not perfect due to their newly found hatred towards Man. But we have all experienced a drive-thru worker who has a hatred towards Man. I'm gonna give the Elder the A tier. So of the first ocean creatures, we have the Serpent, the giant hostile creature who loves to beat up my poor old boat. Logistically, a giant water tank would have to be installed and the food would have to be waterproof to even allow the Serpent to work in the first place. The Serpent is mean and too aggressive, it would stink up my food, it doesn't seem to have the intelligence or desire to serve food in the first place, and it doesn't have any drive to get the dough. Throw the Serpent into the F tier. Now we have the chitin-bearing Leviathan next, which definitely has the mild-mannered attitude needed for the drive-thru. I just have a hunch that the Leviathan is capable in learning to some degree and would at least seemingly be nice enough to approach, even without the real ability to communicate. I think it wouldn't care to eat your meal in front of you and would at least pass off your bag as you look upon this magnificent beast. I think the Leviathan has some positive and negative aspects, so I'm going to place it in the middle and put it into the C tier. The last oceanic creatures are the fish. I mean, we're just going to automatically throw them into the E tier as we can at least use them for food. Otherwise, useless. They wouldn't even understand the concept of money or working, so if we could just get them in the restaurant, we could cook them up. Now we move to the swamp where we find the Abomination, who seems to spawn in one singular spot at the absolute worst time when you're just wanting to like get some iron. This big doofus is one that I see having no mental abilities beyond survival, no care for anything at all except to crush your ice cream cone right in front of you. Now let's just throw the Abomination into the F tier. Next up is the Blob. We know where this is going. F tier. Following the Blob, we come across the Oozer. F tier. Let's move on. So next is the Draugr, who are people that were smited down by Thor, Odin, and Freya due to their pride. This pride was so strong that it allowed these people to be resurrected as Draugr. So I think if the Draugr were somehow convinced to be workers, they would have a perfect record in terms of customer service and efficiency purely due to their pride. Now they would have to somehow communicate to some extent, and so let's just hope their tongues still function and they're not all rotted out and nasty. But overall, I think the Draugr would be a little bit of a risk, but otherwise they would at least be decent, so I'm going to place them into the B tier. Now we have the Draugr Elite, so just take just about everything I said with the normal Draugr and apply it here, but there is even more pride and more strength involved. Now, I know the Elite is missing an arm, but our local fast food joint hires and protects those with disabilities, so I think the Elite would be a tad better, so I'm going to kick it up into the A tier. So next up is the Leech. Now, hear me out for the Leech. We throw it into the meat grinder and then add it in with the normal beef, and we serve said meat as hot dogs for low prices, and no one would be none the wiser. Otherwise, no redeeming qualities. E tier. The Surtlings are next, who are basically just fire imps that are nerfed to the ground in the swamps due to the rain. Now, Surtlings have a major advantage and a major drawback. On one end, they could keep your food warm if we just make them a metal tray below the food. On the other hand, they will burn you if you're in any remote proximity of them. I mean, they seem to be intelligent to some extent and seem at least willing to work. I know that they're one giant fire hazard, but somehow if we could contain them logistically and we may have at least some form of a decent worker. So with that, I'm going to kick them into the C tier. The Ghastly Wraith is next, who is just a spectral entity that comes down from above and blinds us with their blue hue as they come to inform us that we are not wanted in the swamps. The Wraith seems more than capable and quite intelligent, although it is a vengeful spirit coming down. Maybe this vengeance could be used to harness its full potential as a drive-thru worker, as we can somehow convince it that it can find peace once it has served 1 million or even a billion customers. I think the Wraith is much more capable compared to that to the spectrally related Ghost, as I could see it doing great in all criteria and could maybe even put on more of a show with its ghostly powers. The Wraith in my eyes is one that is top tier material as long as we can convince it to use all that hateful energy and morph it to hate that there are hungry customers who need some delicious mozzarella sticks. Overall, with this in mind, I think I could do it. I think I could give the Wraith the highest tier of S tier. Lastly, for the swamp, we have the legendary lime green muddy goopy beast known as Bone Mass. Now, this one is pretty obvious given its poisonous status and gluttonous appearance from the slimy and jiggly body as well as the trophy. Bone Mass would either hand you a gelatinous malformed order or not hand you anything at all and would deny that it ate it even as you see your exact order in its body floating around and being dissolved. So of course Bone Mass will be the first boss that I place all the way at the bottom into the F tier. We move to the Silverfield Mountains where we encounter the first creature, the wolf. Now in Valheim, wolves can be domesticated through being enclosed and fed meat over time, so I think we have some major potential here as we know that dogs are more than capable of running stands and therefore can run drive-thrus. Now, of course, it wouldn't be the best at communications, but I think it could do well in the other categories. Customers would simply go through the drive-thru just to pet the big wolf and give it treats, so there's a great potential for an increase in sales as well. The wolf would lack communication, yes, but otherwise would be a fantastic candidate as long as someone works the microphone. I won't put it all the way at the top, but I will throw the wolf into the A tier. Next up, we have the Drake, a legless dragon who I personally wonder if they army crawl with their wings on the ground or slither like a snake. The Drake is semi-competent, and I think it would make some of the best milkshakes and ice cream that would wow just about anyone. The Drake does not seem to have a great temperament though, and would seemingly blast frostballs when slightly frustrated. I think the Drake would also have some issues working the cash register, and has an attitude that I think complements the idea that they will need some smoke breaks. Overall, the Drakes seem to be okay in a few regards and bad in others, so I'm going to put it in the middle and throw it into the C tier. We now have the creature with the rock-hard stomach, and arms, and face, and everything, the stone golem. Think of this big hulking pile of stone as a protector of both the mountains and the silver veins that are underneath it. Now, imagine if we can harness that capability and ensure that there won't be any crazy customers trying to come through the drive-thru window because of the other side is the ultimate deterrent. I think the stone golem is great in all regards. No customer complaints that we know of. All orders are distributed. The stone golem keeps and maintains the peace, and we don't have to pay it much, if not at all, as it just turns back into rocks once its shift is over. I think the stone golem is one that I'll place all the way at the top and throw into the S tier. So now we have the wolf man that lives in the mountains, aka the Fenring. Now the Fenring are just the barbaric type who dish out damage and have no desire to come in at any time before 8 p.m. to work. Now if we have a 24-hour fast food joint, they would be crucial for those night shifts, but they don't seem to be the greatest at serving food. The Fenring is okay to me, as it can use that wolf-like intelligence to at least understand the situations and tasks given to it, so I'm going to place it in the middle and throw it into the C tier. From Wolfman to a Wolfman with a cloak and magic, we now have the Cultist, who of note is almost the same as the Fenring, except displays a higher intelligence through magic, and I mean at least decides to wear some article of clothing and decorating their living quarters, but otherwise they're just a smarter version of the Fenring, so I'm going to place them a tier above and throw the Cultist into the B tier. So now we have the Fenring on all fours with the giant hands, the Ulf. I just don't see me placing this fellow anywhere but a tier below from the Fenring and throw it into the D tier, simply because this fellow seems like a lesser version of a Fenring. Sorry, Ulf. So now we have another food that we can use, the chicken of the cave, aka the bat. Now bats have good intelligence, but no voice mimicry and such to really communicate like the crow. The bat is just a lesser version of the crow in my mind, but at least it can use echolocation to find the fries they forgot to put in my bag at breakneck speeds. I would give the bat the B tier. The king of the furry wolfmen is next, Girhafa, who uses ice instead of fire like the cultist for his attacks. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. I placed the cultists in the B tier, but now I'll place Girhafa in the A tier, who is probably more intelligent and could use his ice for some nice soft ice to enjoy in people's Arnold Palmers. Mama Motor is the final creature of the mountains, of which she is known for countless battles and W's. Now, as the mother of all drakes, I think Motor would have that motherly love that is known far and wide and transcends everything. You would pull up, order, and then see a giant beast once you approach the window. Your fear takes over, but once you hear her say, "How you doing, baby?" your heart will melt and you will know that you are at the right place. Motor is intelligent enough to survive the test of time and battle, can be efficient by commanding her young and using her abilities, and will make you leave with a smile that reaches ear to ear. Motor is one that I have no issue at all with placing in the top in the S tier. Now we move to the plains where we find the creature that is sure to greet you as soon as you step foot in the biome, the Death Skeeto. Now those greetings make me think that the Death Skeeto is immediately one that would be excellent at greeting people as they pull up to the menu and speaker, but imagine hearing this. I bet some of you watching this just reached around and swatted near your ears. So the communication isn't there while the efficiency and enthusiasm are. Otherwise, there's a severe security risk, as I can easily see the Death Skeeto going on the offensive, and the customers would be frightened in the first place simply by reading the name tag and seeing the name Death Skeeto on it. So I won't put it in the F tier, but I will throw it into the E tier. The Ox and Lizard mixed Lox is next up on the list. Now, Lox seem to have the intelligence equivalent of cattle, and like tame ones like to destroy my base whenever a small little grayling gets anywhere near it. Simply startling a Lox will cause it to go destroy the entire drive-thru, but as long as there is courteous and kind people going through, everything will be okay. But still, the Lox doesn't have too much drive or communicational abilities, but at least people will drive by and enjoy petting it and such. The Lox is a creature that cares for people at least when domesticated, which is enough for me to place it into the D tier. We move on to the cackling goblin adjacent Fullings. Now, a big step up from most of these other creatures on this list is that it seems to understand the importance of currency and does know how to farm as seen in their villages. The Fullings are brutish in nature, but still would be at least decent, as their intelligence of currency and their exchange of it would be a huge help. They might speak in broken sentences in the mic, but they would still be able to communicate okay. Now they might try and scam people out of their money or simply not give the correct change on purpose, but I still see the Fulling being at least to an extent a decent choice. So with that, I'm gonna place them into the B tier. We have the beefed up macho Fulling now, the Fulling Berserker. I mean, it's just another stereotype of a stronger and dumber variant of an enemy. Since there is a decrease in brain power though, I will just knock it down a tier and place the Fulling Berserker into the C tier. Now on the other end, we have the higher intelligence variant that can at least cast magics, the Fulling Shaman. Let the Shaman use its magical barriers to generate a barrier around food if someone somehow dropped it and prevent it from just going all over the place. But again, since it does understand currency and is more likely smarter than the average Fulling, I'm gonna knock the Fulling Shaman up a tier and place it into the A tier. Next up on the list, we find the growth akin to the blobs and oozers, and as with the others, I don't see them doing anything at all for the drive-thru besides making one big tarry sticky mess. So the growth is going to go into the F tier. The tag team Terror, Zeal, and Thunger are next, who I think can at least to some extent put their heads together and can at least make it through a shift, maybe without destroying someone. Maybe Zeal can somehow contain Thunger to some extent, while Thunger can help get something off of the top shelf for Zeal. But I mean, otherwise, I don't see much to this one. I'm just going to put them in the middle and throw them into the C tier. The final boss of the plains, Yagluth, has some potential as the worshipped and revered Fulling deity. Yagluth instantly reminds me of High Lord Wolnir from Dark Souls 3, with the chest, arms, and head of a skeletal being crawling around and a crown on his head. Yagluth at minimum is adaptable and has the learning ability to understand the cash register like no other, but with the crown on his head as he was once a ruler, his pride may get in the way of wanting to serve as he is accustomed to being served. So he may not have the greatest customer service. Overall, Yagluth would be a good candidate as long as he can satiate his pride and ensure that each customer leaves with exactly what they order. So with that, I'm going to give him the A tier. Into the Mistlands we go, where we find ourselves meeting the Seekers, giant ant-like bugs who ensure that the first-time visit in the Mistlands is always a pleasurable one. Now, Seekers are just about the same as real-life worker ants in that they are born from the queen and protect hives that produce royal jelly. So think of the Seeker as one giant ant ant that would terrify 98% of customers that pull up to the window. But hey, at least the 2% would feel some other emotion. I could see a very small off chance of the Seeker working, but otherwise there's like no chance. I'll just give the Seeker the E tier, as it can attempt to do something. Same with the Seeker Brood, I'm gonna place it in the E tier. Just think of a Seeker Brood as a teenage ant that has like multiple pimples all over its face and the stereotypical teenage worker voice. Now, the Seeker Soldier, on the other hand, is the brute that would destroy anything and everything it sees, as it probably considers everything that is not Seeker related as an enemy, so I'm gonna throw them into the F tier. The passive and timid hare is next up on this list, who would obviously throw off the mic and run as soon as a customer approached the speaker. The hare could be used as food, yes, but could also perform as some sort of cutesy gimmick like the wolf, but to a much lesser effect. Hares are intelligent enough to at least do something to some extent, but otherwise seem to be pretty poor contenders, so I'm gonna go ahead and place them into the D tier. Next up is the random Zeppelin-like creature you see in the sky that rains down the pane, the Yawl. Now, Yawl is just one big mean fella that floats around you and attacks at the most inconvenient times. I mean, I don't really see any sort of upside to using the Yawl, besides to make it look like a giant balloon at the Thanksgiving parade. So let's just throw the Yawl in the F tier and let's move on. Now, the Tick, on the other hand, is one that I think with utmost certainty could be placed at the tip top. Now, did I get you? Of course, we're gonna also place the Tick into the F tier. The blue small humanoid Draugr rogue is up next, of which I will note immediately how nice and refreshing it is to see a humanoid after all of those bugs and whatnot of the Mistlands. The rogue is of course immediately higher tier material due to them communicating well, having the intelligence and skill to use the arbalest, and the compassion and camaraderie to allow us into the bases and such until we want to steal their little extractors. Now, they do have a bit of alcoholic tendencies that might affect their work performance a tad, so I will place them a tier below the S tier and throw them into the A tier. Similar to the rogue is the Draugr mage, of which I find to be perfect as they are the old man wizards who are ready to serve. What person in their right mind wouldn't love pulling up to a window and seeing an old man wizard sitting there ready to take your cash or card? So of course I'm going to place the mage into the tip top S tier. I think they are maybe a little less inebriated than the rogue. The boss of the Mistlands, the Queen, is a giant larva-like seeker that lives within the infested citadel. Now, the Queen to me does not share those motherly affections that would be found within Motor. She produces offspring for the sake of survival, nothing more. The Queen is just one big insectoid that wants to produce one mighty family. Maybe if she can be convinced to put aside her pride and work the window, she can use her fellow seekers in a more meek and mild manner to serve the general populace, but that seems like a far shot, and so I'm going to throw the Queen into the D tier. We move to the final biome, the Ashlands, where we sail right into a bone maw, who's the equivalent of a fiery serpent, and that's where I think they have the exact same qualities, except the bone maw is more of a threat to your cutesy little boat. So with that, I'll place the bone maw in the same tier as the serpent and throw them into the F tier. Similarly, the lava blob is the same as the normal blob, but is on fire. So it's gonna go F tier. Up next, we find the Fallen Valkyrie, who is a decayed and aggressive version of her S tier normal counterpart. Now, that decay and overall loss in sanity and mentality is the greatest liability, but otherwise, I think that the Fallen Valkyrie is still a viable candidate, but just not S tier material. So that I'm gonna knock her down a couple tiers and place her into the B tier. Now, the Charred Warrior is next, who's just a buffed up and little bit crispy version of the normal skeleton. Other than that, there really isn't much else to say, as I do think of them having identical characteristics in terms of working at a drive-thru. I'm just going to place the Charred Warrior in the same tier as the skeleton and put them in the A tier. Following the Charred Warrior is the Charred Warlock, of which any creature with the name Warlock in its name I have ranked a tier above their normal counterpart. But what qualities does the Charred Warlock have that makes it better than the typical warrior? It is a bit more intelligent, yes, but it still does not have the communicational abilities that I think is required to place it into the S tier. So for once, I'm going to go ahead and keep the Charred Warlock in the same tier and place it into the A tier. Next up is the Charred Marksman with its big great bow and dead stare. I find this fellow to be the bad boy of the charred creatures, and of which seems to have a much more cold demeanor that it would make it not viable to interact with people. The Marksman just seems to be extra dead inside in comparison to that of the other dead charred warriors, so I'm gonna knock it down a tier and place it into the B tier. Now we have the charred creature that appears to be a user and abuser of some form of substance, the charred twitcher. Now, if you pull up to a window and see that the charred twitcher with that sort of appearance is twitching all over while taking your cash, you do not think that it's because of some sort of medical condition. You think it is because of some form of substance abuse, and whether the charred twitcher beats the allegations or not, I still think this would greatly affect its customer service. No one would wish to be served by it. So I will have to place the Twitcher pretty low in comparison to the other charred creatures, and I'm gonna throw it into the D tier. We move on to another bird, the Vulture, who is just a vulture in the Ashlands that for some reason can't take damage from the boiling waters, even though it's a native creature from there. Like a typical vulture, it would eat the food that it is told to give to the customer. But on the other hand, maybe we can use the meat from it like we can with so many other candidates on this list. Throw in the hot dog meat, baby. I'm gonna give the Vulture the E tier. So now we talk about the Morgan, which the big old bowling ball ability itself would make me crack up no matter how many times it screws up. I think there's some sort of customer service value to that to keep it out of the F tier and place it into the E tier. We move to the ash swine known as the Askvin, who are tameable and rideable creatures for the Ashlands. I find these creatures, when domesticated, to be more of a lovable, although not adorable type of creature, where some will find it hideous, but come to enjoy it due to the dog-esque nature of it. Of course, general customer service will be iffy, and it is quite adaptable as it understands and allows us to ride them once domesticated, but otherwise it seems to be a pretty bland candidate. So I'll throw it in the middle and put it into the C tier. So now we move to the Scug, where this one may be controversial, but our local fast food joint needs some defense. Now, I will absolutely hire the Scug for this role and place one in each corner to defend our turf from the other burger joint across the way. So otherwise, I'm just going to give the Scug the D tier and let it defend to its last bolt. Now, the final mini-boss, Lord Rito, is up on this list, who is capable of eliminating a player in a single attack. But, I mean, otherwise he really is just a charred warrior on roids. Does an increase in strength meet or upgrade any criteria for a drive-thru? Nothing really, besides moving boxes closer to the window with ease. The title of Lord does imply that he does look down on this job as he wants to be served and not serve. So I am going to knock him down a tier because of the attitude issue. Get to work, Lord Rito. That's why you're on this tier list to begin with. B tier. So now we have the final boss in this tier list, Fodder, the Emerald one. Fodder is just a big green dragon who is known as a father. We run into the issue of being too prideful for the work and claiming that the customers are too stingy, asking him of all creatures for some extra napkins. Fodder just does not have the same appeal as the loving motor and seems to have been the bad cop parent who had to get out the belt when a kid was acting out of hand. Fodder seemingly is not the best to serve up some food to the normal people, and at best would work at the drive-thru begrudgingly. I just don't have the same sentiment or think too highly for Fodder, so I'm gonna place him into the D tier. Now, let's get to some more domesticated creatures. Chicken, deep fryer, B tier. Hen, also deep fryer, with some mashed potatoes and gravy. B tier. So now we're gonna move on to the tutorial assistant, Hugin. I mean, I placed the crow into the S tier earlier, and of course, Hugin is an even better version of the crow. I think Hugin would assist people as they pass by and help them with their major life choices, just trying to be as best of an assistant as possible, maybe even changing people's lives around by simply interacting with them through the drive-thru window. But of course, I will place Hugin into the S tier for all the positive aspects of the crow, but would communicate and interact with people even better than that. I mean, this is going to be pretty easy. Just follow up with his brother and place Moonin also into the S tier. Next up, we meet the shopkeep who loves to haggle and loot corpses, Haldor. Haldor has all the capabilities and services needed needed to work the drive-thru as he is a merchant by trade, but the outlying issue with him is his cheap attitude and his lack of care for the customer and only cares for the coin. He would attempt to haggle the customers to either buy more food or pay more for the food they purchased. Think of a blue, shorter Mr. Krabs. So even though he is a major cheapskate and has a bad attitude, he would still pass with flying colors in all the other criteria. So, I mean, I'm not going to put him into the S tier, but put Haldor into the A tier. Now, take out everything I said about Haldor and throw out every negative aspect about him, and you have the perfect worker named Hildir. She's polite, she greets you with sincerity, she knows what is in season or out of style, she is perfect in every category. She would be the one that you would automatically go to her fast food joint for, even though you passed 4 of the exact same restaurants to get there. She has my heart, and she has an automatic bid for S tier. To finish this list, we meet the dark, shadowy figure in the distance, a god with one eye, a bunch of ravens to watch us, and a dream for us to destroy his enemies so we can enter Valhalla. Mr. Allfather himself, Odin, who in Valheim is a simple observant checking on our progress, immediately giving the micromanager vibes, which tells me he would have some issues at the drive-thru. He would just bark orders while performing no actual work for himself. His workers would hate him, but at least there would be some form of structure, although someone would try and steal his spear when he isn't looking, which he always is, people. We will finish this tier list by placing Odin as a mid-tier entrant into the B tier. And that is another list down, and another entry that is completed. We now know which Valheim creatures are best suited to be a drive-thru worker at your favorite fast food joint. Now come back next week where I am going to answer another question through tier listing. But as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, people, adios.